I just wish that we could have chosen just a few things to focus on and that the movie had a tighter story to tell.
Welcome back to the Men of Steel podcast. I'm Case Aiken, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Jmike Folsom.
Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back, indeed. We have a returning guest who it's been a little while since they've been on. We've got CeeJay.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me back on. I'm so excited to talk about this weird thing.
CeeJay, when was the last time you were on?
Wonder Woman 1984, because I'm the only person on the internet who liked it.
There we go. Yeah, the one that we'd already done our episode, and we're like, oh yeah, here more thoughts over at the Real Movie Critic versus the Cine Guy, and then you were like, or I want to come in now and talk more. And I was like, yeah, sure, fuck it, why not? We'd already done like 4 months of Wonder Woman content at that point. and you're back for another movie because we wanted to talk about a movie that honestly came out a little while ago, but I kind of couldn't brave the theater for in the time of COVID. Like, it takes something
completely
special. Completely
understandable.
It's weird to say because I do want to champion it, but finally it's on Disney Plus, so we're talking about the Eternals.
Yeah, the Eternals. An interesting thing.
A nice way to put it.
Yeah.
I think this movie's fascinating. I'm so excited to talk about it.
I thought it was a movie. I was like, oh, I have thoughts. So like that, I have thoughts.
I mean, like, because I did really want to champion it. Like, I was very excited about it coming out. Mm-hmm. And I was real stoked to like sit down on my couch and pay the extra $30 and watch it on Disney Plus. And then when I went to look the weekend it came out, I was like, oh, are they not? Oh, is it only theaters? That's bullshit.
They was like, you got to come out here to the AMC with Nicole Kidman and brave it for the Eternals.
Yeah, like I've got some obligations that mean that I have to be out in the world that I just can't get around. And then I had some family stuff that was like, well, I definitely don't want to get sick because there are family members I don't want to pass it on to. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I can't do it. I wish you all the best, Eternals. And then the reviews came out and I was like, I didn't wish hard enough.
Should have wished a little bit harder.
Yeah, this was not super well received. This is probably one of the lesser received Marvel movies.
Yeah, which is super interesting.
Mm-hmm. Definitely in the bottom 10.
Yeah.
There's so many.
Yeah, there's a ton of them. And it had such an interesting story leading up to it, specifically because it has Academy Award winner Chloe Zhao as the director, who was an indie director known for very small, not smaller in scale, but like very grand in terms of visual scope films and neo-westerns, The Rider and Nomadland. And I actually wrote a piece in Monoplex about Nomadland and how it was very hard for me to get through. It was very deliberately paced and not a lot is happening plot-wise. A lot of it is very interior. A lot of it is very thematic, and it is not a movie that is trying to hold your hand. And I was very fascinated by the fact that not only did she want to make a Marvel movie, the fact that Marvel was like, yeah, come do this. Specifically because the movie that we got, I felt was going to be more akin to Captain Marvel, which is like you bring in these small directors and that you can that aren't as familiar with the studio system, and you can kind of like push them around and get them to do whatever you want them to do just because you need directors for the film that you're trying to make. But then you also get indie cred for plucking these people out of whatever fucking Sundance thing that they did.
Right.
And the result, I think, and the reason I say it's interesting is because like it is so much more interesting, I keep saying interesting. I don't mean to say interesting. I think that thematically and visually, it is so much more ambitious and compelling than most of Marvel's output. the Marvel Studios output, but it also is a prime example of, sorry to use Twitter lingo here, not understanding the assignment.
Yeah.
And I'm a big proponent of big movies, blockbusters, all that stuff. I think that all the different components of the film industry are very important. But I think that there is something to be said about formula and the way that it is made to crowd please and stuff like that. And if you come into this space that is dominated by and is buoyed financially, creatively, by making sure that everybody in the theater understands what's going on all of the time and is having a great time with it, when you come in with what is essentially like trying to tell the Book of Genesis and a spinoff to the Mission Impossible franchise, you're alienating so many different kinds of people, because the people who love Chloe Zhao and stuff like that feel like she just got chewed up by Marvel and spit out. The people who love Marvel movies feel like they brought in somebody who was not able to meet the standard of like platonic ideal of entertainment that Marvel is able to provide. And so nobody ends up happy.
Yeah, and I mean, like, one of my favorite episodes of Another Pass was you came on for Jupiter Ascending, which is a big fucking movie that is also like the word I used for this movie, or for the Eternals, is messy. Like, the movie is just like, it doesn't quite have the right spectacle. It doesn't quite have the right vibe. There's like a bunch of weird things going on here. Like, I still like it. Like, I the people who hate it, I'm like, why? Like, I don't understand why you hate it. But like, it does not fully, like you said, understand the assignment. It doesn't like hit the nail for anyone. It's too many masters.
Dude, I wanted to like this movie a lot, actually. Because I was like, like the whole sphere of Marvel, and it goes beyond that. You're talking about the Celestials, the Eternals. I'm like, oh, this might be pretty cool. I really want to see this. And then I got to the end and I was like, this feels like Green Lantern. And they should never go full Green Lantern.
I think Green Lantern is a considerably more fun movie to watch than this.
Well, here's the thing. The Celestials are the linchpin on this, why this movie could work, which, like, CeeJay, you said, like, do the Book of Genesis thing in here. I think what they could have made it work is if it felt like we were finding out more stuff about the characters we care about. So far, the only characters that appear in Eternals that we see in any other Marvel movie are the Celestials specifically.
Yeah.
And that's fucking crazy when you think about it. Like, because we've seen Nowhere, which is a big location. We've seen flashbacks of other Celestials, and we saw Ego refer to himself as a Celestial. So there's at least this, like, seed out there of a bigger cosmic world. But, like, they don't talk about Thanos. And they don't do the god stuff. Like, if this was Thor's origin, like a story of the Asgardians and as how they interacted with space shit, that would have been like kind of a different vibe. But the movie has the same problem that the Eternals as a comic book always does, which is that it was created to be a standalone thing, and they were like, oh, this is cool, we should make it part of Marvel. And in both scenarios, I'm like, it doesn't benefit from having that connection.
Yeah, I think that I engage with, especially these sort of newer Marvel movies, particularly Shang-Chi and Eternals. And so much is happening, and the back of my brain is always like, wait until Sam sees this. It is so wild to me that I will watch things like this, the big sort of like exposition info dump that happens in the middle of this movie, and be like, man, Tony Stark built that suit with scraps in a cave. And we got here, and there's so many things that the movie is doing, and the movie is like answering a lot of the criticisms that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has as a whole, that is getting from sort of the critical establishment and film Twitter and stuff like that, in terms of its cinematography, in terms of its performance quality, in terms of like directorial voice. Because the people who really love Chloe Zhao's work prior to this are saying that she got sort of like eaten and swallowed whole by sort of like the Disney Marvel machine. I don't really think that's the case. I've seen Chloe Zhao's other movies. This is very much in line with her work. even though her work is just decidedly more focused. You know, and I think that it's so trying to be, or Kevin Feige allowed it to be so different. There's a sex scene.
Yeah, what's the expecting that?
Oh my gosh.
Talk about pretty people having sex in the most boring way possible.
Okay, so there is an article, I hesitate to call it an article. There was a blog post that came out like last year about like why everybody in like
the
Marvel
desexualization
movies,
of Marvel.
yeah, in Marvel movies and action movies in general right now are in the best shape to be fucking in, and nobody's fucking. And how weird it is. And it felt like this was like an answer to that, but also I happened to watch this film in theaters right next to two children who were very excited to see the new Marvel movie. And it was, one, very uncomfortable, and two, I think that article, and most of everybody who just wants modern mainstream Hollywood filmmaking to be sexier, it doesn't necessarily mean that we want more sex scenes. If the sex scenes are good and are made ethically and whatever, great, that's cool, more sex scenes. But I think it is also about the fact that we just want people on screen who look like they wouldn't mind seeing each other's genitals at some point. And
right, they excuse themselves for the night or something like that.
Or just like in shot, reverse shot, look like they like are next to another human person. There is an extreme sort of like lack of physical and spatial intimacy in these movies. Mm-hmm. And this movie has, and everybody's like, oh, we want Marvel movies to be a little bit sexier, but I don't know if that meant that we wanted the alien robots raw dogging it in Mesopotamia. Like, I don't like it.
Well, this is what you wanted. Aren't you happy, guys?
It is, but you know, there's so many things like that. Also, it's an incredibly diverse movie, which I think is a part of the reason that the Disney's getting really insidious about peppering their movies with like super diverse casts. So like they get like credit for like pushing diversity forward or whatever, but not really doing much to propagate it in any substantial way. And then if the movie like fails, they can just go, oh, well, it must mean that audiences don't want diverse whatever. And so that is something that I and I wouldn't be as irritated by it if it wasn't so much a part of the marketing campaign and things like that. But that is also something that it was like rubbing people the wrong way, because it's just like, okay, the movie's diverse, great, but is it good? And then the movie just turned out not to be, there wasn't a lot of there, or there too much there. I think that's something we can talk about. But yeah,
kind of both, and we'll have to talk about that, because like I think there's a lot of extraneous stuff going on in this movie.
Oh, there's so much. There's so much.
That.
Shall we begin with the text crawl?
Yeah, well, having a text crawl was such a goddamn annoying thing, especially because it's only there as a MacGuffin. Sorry, spoilers for anyone, or not a MacGuffin, pardon me, a red herring.
Sorry, guys.
Yes, spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen the Eternals.
We forgot to say that at the beginning.
Like, I mean, we kind of assume anyone who's watching our episodes knows. Like, the only time we had a spoiler-free thing, we were like very clear it was spoiler-free. Because otherwise, like, what the fuck? Why are you listening to a podcast if people talk about their anticipation of a movie?
First of all, because we're awesome. Second, okay.
But yeah, like having a text crawl that is literally a lie was a choice.
Yeah.
What? Was it a lie?
Yeah, it was
a lie, because they do, in that big info dump in the middle of the movie, they just completely contradict.
Or is it just a matter of perspective?
But here's the thing. The fact that we get like the whole like twist, the plot twist is that the opening text crawl is a lie. that is a move. I don't think I've ever seen that before. Like that's it's Palpatine's actually dead, like kind of thing.
Somehow Palpatine,
even though we introduced it in the text crawl, or like, oh, Luke didn't actually go to Tatooine to recover anyone. That's not actually Luke. That's Luke Skywalker. Like doing some sort of like weird twist in the like to go against the status quo, but the status quo is only from the fucking text crawl at the beginning. Yeah. Like, because that's the only thing that really makes us be like convinced that they're aliens and that they're
and then they show up in a spaceship.
Well, yeah, they show up, but they also look really human. So, maybe they're just the thing from the comics, which like that was a weird thing going into the marketing where everyone's like, oh, they're aliens coming to us, and I'm like, well, in the comics, they're not actually aliens. They're humans that have been like advanced by the Celestials, like blah, blah, blah. But I guess they're making it aliens. I can live, whatever. And then it's like, oh no, they kind of are. Like they're weird robots built to look like humans and be forever.
Cyborgs.
It was closer at least.
I don't of the Eternals comics that I read, which were not many. I was very confused when we get into this film and they explain the Deviants and stuff like that. And the Deviants are just like muscle dogs. Like they're not like humanoid until they become humanoid. Like it right. is. That was very strange. It sort of is reflective of Marvel's penchant of having like faceless things to just punch. But like, I guess it was this movie's trying to do so much. Yeah, because like they're aliens, but they're also like linked to various like Greek, not just Greek, but like mythological like legends, like Gilgamesh.
They're all there.
Athena and
Makkari the speedster.
Yeah, it's like I was just I found myself always trying to catch up to it, and I can't not be in the know while the characters are also not in the know. You can have one. You cannot have both. Especially when there's so many of them that you have to that we have to be introduced to for the very first time. Like we don't even get to Kumail until like almost the midpoint of the movie.
Yeah, I think Phastos is like the third act basically.
Yeah,
like the break into 3.
So it's a very very strange thing. But I also want to chat about, I think, the worst example of the Marvel movies being trailers for the next movie thing that I have encountered in one of these movies. And that is the very existence of the Dane Whitman character.
I know! Why the fuck is he there? Yes! Aside from the fact that the most famous arc from the 90s was the Cersei Dane Whitman arc. Like, where I found out about the Eternals, like, that's the only reason I can think about having that character there, which is that, like, oh yeah, there was a whole thing in the Avengers about how they were fucking, and he was also hooking up with Crystal, and so there's such a Real Housewives situation going on in 90s Avengers comics, like, you have no idea.
That sounds, I would love a Real Housewives.
When the movie ended, I had to turn to my wife and explain, like, break down all the tea, and I was like, this is like such a crazy era right there. Of like, all right, so Cersei's going crazy, but she's psychically linked to Black Knight, and he's making her feel more sane. But at the same time, like, her former lover Ikaris is showing up and trying to convince her to go back and deal with the Mad Weary. Meanwhile, Black Knight is, while psychically linked to Cersei, also hooking up with Crystal from the Inhumans.
Oh, Cersei had Mad Weary in that.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
While at the same time, she's being stalked by another reality's version of Dane Whitman, who has infiltrated the Avengers with other reality versions of Avengers, like all replacing their accurate people, including the Vision, which is why he ended up with the red and yellow body after being like in the all-white version from the 80s. Like, again, meanwhile, Quicksilver is very aware that his wife is sleeping with the Black Knight, and he's pretty pissed off about this whole situation. And like, of course, Crystal like only linked up with Quicksilver after previously dating Johnny Storm and deciding to have an affair with Quicksilver. So she just likes drama.
See, this is the stuff we need in the movie.
There's not enough time. This movie took up almost 3 hours, and it still wouldn't be enough time for that.
Well, here's the thing. This movie is so similar to The Old Guard.
Yes.
In terms of like how it's structured and what they're doing with it, which is weird that we're also dealing with this like big thing going on with them. So like the fact that it's about a bunch of people living throughout history together as a small little community is kind of an invention for this movie, because like there's a lot of Eternals in the comics. They have whole cities and their whole pantheon. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's not like 5 of them kind of like, or how it's like 7 total in this movie. Like not very much. Like it's that structure right there that they're superimposing here. And like the fact that the Eternals can die and like are not invulnerable is like a weird like power down for this movie. That's like kind of just there for the purpose of like making it smaller than it needs to be, but at the same time being so weird and abstract.
Here's the thing. I wish that it would have chosen a side. Because this is like 3 movies wrapped in one. And I would have, I don't know if anybody else would have, but I would have accepted a more intimate movie that was about them having these that was about them having these sort of philosophical arguments, rather than like we like touch on it a little bit and then we have to go do the thing where we're on a beach and we're just like throwing discs at each other and flying up into the air and stuff is coming out into and the Tiamat coming out to Earth. I think that you pick one of those things. Make the sequel about the philosophy or make this movie about the philosophy. And no one is even able to like say their piece because there's like sort of a ticking clock going. And I just wish the movie wasn't trying to do so much, which is weird because I'm not usually that person. I am usually the person who's just like, everything you have to tell me about these people, tell me in the first movie. And if you can come up with a better, like a cool way to get them back, cool. That's great. I feel, what's the movie? Shazam.
Oh, yeah.
A lesser movie than Shazam would have saved the rest, spoilers for Shazam, would have saved the rest of the kids turning into Shazam folks for a sequel.
Yeah, totally.
And it didn't. It put
Jmike remembers just how excited I was in theaters when that
remember.
happened.
Oh God, he was so excited.
I got to see that movie 2 weeks before it came out. I ran out screaming to everyone, "Have you to go see Shazam?" And I think that this movie sort of like tested that theory or want of mine to its limits, because there's so much of this that could have been better fleshed out if they had it's trying to do like 16 things, and if they had chosen 6 of those things to do, I think that we would have come away with a more coherent movie. And a movie with something larger to say. It just seems like all of this stuff is bubbling under the surface, or is just like just off screen, and no one is satisfied with it, which is strange. But I will say that something that's interesting about Marvel movies is that with the interconnectedness and all that, even when I don't like the movie, I'm always like, well, I'm interested to see how this affects everything else. I would imagine that the Eternals are going to like return in like the Thor movie or something. It seems like you'd be the closest to that stuff. But like, I am interested in seeing how they can take in the same way that, even though I wasn't head over heels for the Captain Marvel movie, I was super interested to see her again, because she's a really interesting presence to have in. She's Superman. She's a very interesting presence to have in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I want to see her fight Shang-Chi, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah, I just wish that we could have chosen just a few things to focus on, and that the movie had a tighter story to tell.
Yeah. Should we talk about the Deviant in the room in terms of the plot? Like, by the time we got to the third act, I was not sure why the Deviant plot was there at all, aside from just to like get you to the third act.
Because they needed people to punch.
But like, if this was a smarter movie, I feel like they would have had some kind of reckoning with the lead deviant, where he's part of the team, and then by the because there is that half a moment, and then they like continue to fight him, and it's just like, wait, hold on, wait. I thought the whole point was that they were like kind of realizing that they're all parts of this machine, and that they're all breaking their role in the machine. Yeah, and they're still going to be fighting no, fuck you.
I was like, what is going on here? What is the purpose of this? Why? Okay, like you could clearly see that the deviant gained sentience. Okay, he's like talking to people like, hey, we are all slaves to this machine, right? They're like, what? And he flies off.
Right. Like that could have been really interesting, at least from, I mean, it might be cliche, but at least it would be like fun to see like the whole, we are all part of this machine, let us break the mold. Like, that's an Agent Smith and a Neo teaming up would be really cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and the fact that they're all fighting, Ikaris is revealed to be the sort of
spoilers.
Did we not already do the spoiler thing?
We already did. Giving more
spoilers.
With Ikaris turning out to be the big bad in the end, it's interesting that we spent so much time off the coasts of wherever fighting Ikaris. And Crow, I think, is the
it's Crow. Yeah,
Crow was not a part of that fight. Crow was just off fighting Thena somewhere.
And a big part of that fight is Phastos, who doesn't show up until the end of the movie, aside from like at the very beginning.
Yeah,
and also because they are not together in the present day timeline. You're seeing really sort of damaged dynamics between everyone, but the sort of reveal in, was it Portugal or wherever, where they broke up, the reveal of what happened to cause that damage.
Yeah, it was Mexico.
I
think it was.
So whatever happened to cause that damage, that reveal was not, I feel like, sufficient enough to let us know where all these characters stood with each other. I had no idea who felt what about whom, with the exception of maybe Druig and Ikaris, because they were dudes and they scowled. And and it's really weird that, with the exception of all of the stuff going on with Sprite, none of the other female characters had relationships with each other, had any discernible dynamic. Like Kingo seems scared of Ikaris. That's something, I guess. Druig and Ikaris butt heads. Gilgamesh has this sort of offshoot thing with Thena, but no one else is really affected by that, I guess, unless until like she starts attacking people. But and Druig and Makkari have their relationship, but what is Makkari's relationship to Cersei? What is the Sprite's relationship to Thena? How did all of this time apart affect them in that way? How did all of this time apart, knowing that their sort of mission was complete and that they could just sort of fuck off and do whatever, how did all of that time change them? The part of them being actual eternal beings lead to jokes about being really old, but it never seemed to change anyone's perspective. It never seemed to inform why they do what they do. And this is interesting because that's stuff that Chloe Zhao is good at. She's good at that interior stuff. She's good at developing characters' mindsets from the beginning of the story to the end of the story and changing them along the way, or having their resolve change people around them. But this movie is so concerned with letting you know that like the Celestials created everything, and with the punching and showing you the sort of Valerian world and all of that kind of stuff, that you don't have time to actually sit with these people and figure out who they are. So you get to the end of the movie and I don't know who Cersei is. The evolution of her powers, I guess, is supposed to be able to make me feel a certain way about what she can do and what that means for her, but it doesn't.
Did they ever explain that?
Yes, they explained it by saying that, like, at the beginning, they were like, she can't transpose. What is the word?
Living matter. Transmute.
Living matter.
Yeah. So I was like,
which is, by the way, like, I don't understand how that works. And also, she is Cersei, as in the person who turns people into pigs.
But like, I was like, it was because she got Ajax's little orb that it amplified her powers, or is it just because like
that just meant that she gets to talk to Big Red.
Oh, I thought that was like an opening up of her understanding of the nature of her powers.
That's the thing. That's the whole thing. Like,
but we don't have like we can't agree on this whole situation. We have all seen this movie.
Yeah,
we can't articulate exactly how that was supposed to work.
I was like, cause that's what I thought it was. I thought that she got the orb, and she was like the prime designate, and like it amplified her powers.
I didn't know that amplified her powers at all. I just thought that means she got a direct line to the fire truck face.
Well, like, CeeJay, like, going off of what you're saying in terms of how characters change, I think the interesting way you could have done something is go the exact opposite way. Like, the Eternals are very explicitly like implacable, like set in their ways to the point where like they don't have changes. So the idea that one would change at the very, like, in the how they would approach things and actually side against the celestial plan could be the really interesting point, that if they're all so set in their ways that by the time we're seeing the modern day, like, it doesn't matter how much technology has changed if nothing else has changed. Like, everything about them will always stay the same.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, because like there's this idea in Marvel comics in general that like immortality can only be maintained if you have a focus, which most things do on a specific level. So like there's like the elders of the universe, like the Collector or the Grandmaster, like characters that we've seen in the MCU who are who maintain their sanity such as it is by virtue of like the vast stretch of time by having this like singular obsession. And the Eternals have a similar representation of that. Like, Phastos is the most technically advanced of them, or like the most tech focused one of them, but they're all like big about building shit and coming up with crazy Kirby stuff. And Makkari's entire shtick is figuring out how to go faster than they went before. And like they keep building cooler bikes and more awesome spaceships and whatever, just to go faster and faster and faster. And that's their entire thing. Like a need for speed right there. That like Gilgamesh or the Forgotten One or Hero or whatever name you want to give him in it is always about being this like physical specimen of the Eternals. That like each of them has their focus, which is why their powers deviate from each other. But they actually all have the same powers. It's just each one of them like has an emphasis on a different thing. And like to explore that in this movie would be really cool. But like they actually kind of don't. Like some characters don't, like they don't change and develop as characters, but they don't make a point about it. It doesn't feel weird when you talk to them about it. Like it seems like a lack of character development as opposed to
a lack of character development.
Yeah. Exactly. They're not doing it on purpose. They're just not developing the characters here.
It's interesting that you should say that because like I said, the movie is so, and I go back and forth on whether I blame this on the sort of narrative economics of the Marvel movie or Chloe Zhao. But this movie spends so much time trying to put forth the image of import and the aesthetics of grandeur, that they do all of this sort of side talking that sort of gestures to philosophy, but never actually says anything meaningful. And that is a problem when all of your characters are like constantly sort of like spouting off platitudes about humanity and what their presence on Earth means. But then in the climax of your film, it opens up a pretty large question about whether or not the Earth deserves to survive if its survival will prevent the birthing of a bunch of new lives elsewhere in the universe. And then so many characters just like opt out of the conversation. Like so many people, so many of them don't have anything to, like they fight Ikaris, but they don't have anything to say about it. Kingo just leaves, which, you know.
Yeah.
I like people have like said negative things about that. I enjoyed actually the perspective of having that character who's like, I agree with them, but I'm not going to take up their cause. Like, I'm not going to, like, it's not going to push me past the, like, other morals that I have. So, like, I saw that as at least having an interesting philosophical standpoint.
I thought it was just that he was kind of torn because they were his friends, but he agreed with Ikaris, but he knew that fighting Ikaris was a lost cause, and he just didn't want to get involved with it.
Well, but he also agreed with Ikaris.
Yeah.
I like having that level of conflict with the character.
Yeah, because like he straight up says you don't fight your family, but he agreed with Ikaris. But he was like,
yeah, it's just like I kind of think that I understand that, like, Cersei has like a boyfriend and students here, and she's just like, hey, cool, humans. And I understand that Ikaris is like, this is a job we were sent here to do. But everybody around them, what does Thena even think about this? Or does Thena just want to fight? She's got her own stuff going on because she's got like space Alzheimer's. And then the Sprite is just like on Ikaris' side because she's in love with him. That feels kind of like an intellectual cop-out. We don't really have any perspective on Druig because Druig is just like, oh, Druig is comfortable like taking away people's free will and taking over their minds and stuff like that. But he also does it like cares about whether or not the planet lives or dies, even if he doesn't. I think there are too many characters. And then we spend so much time with them, but we come away utterly confused about how they feel about everything. And that is that's not good. That's just not good storytelling. I really, really wanted this movie to be more than it was, and maybe that's my fault because I'm becoming increasingly disillusioned with Marvel movies. But I and maybe I was just putting too much expectations on it. But also, the movie is really ambitious, and ambition is cool. But if you fall flat, you fall flat.
Like, I was trying to figure out when I was watching this. I was like, what is the purpose of this movie exactly? Is it to like tell this grandiose story and elaborate on it, or is it just to, like, throw extra characters at you that you'll see 3 movies down the road from now?
Yeah.
I was like, is it trying to be like the next Guardians of the Galaxy, but like for adults?
It just feels like a trading card pack.
Yeah, you're just like, all right, cool. These are characters that you'll see later on. The whole scene with like spoilers again, Thanos' brother. You're like, oh, okay, yay, cool. We'll see him later. Or the part with Kip and the black knife, and I was like, I know what that is. This is going to be awesome. But like 4 movies from now, so like, is it here to tell the story, or is it here to just like start off the next phase of movies? It can't really decide what it wants to be most of the time.
I mean, I feel like the after credit stuff, both the appearance of Starfox and then the confirmation of Black Knight, which has, by the way, a Blade cameo. Like, that's supposed to be the voice.
I know.
Somebody had to explain that to me. I said, I walked out of it and I was just like, well, all right.
Like, we debated after watching the movie, like, who it could be, and settled as Blade as one of 3 possibilities. And like, then saw a confirmation. I was like, fuck, all right, cool. At least like at least he was a possible character in that scenario. So cool. But yeah, I'd like the after credit stuff. I think like that is just teaser bait. Like, that's just like leading everything. But like, you know, and the Starfox one like is such a nothing scene in terms of like where it doesn't lessen a movie for me. The Dane Whitman stuff bugs me that there's so much of it in this movie. Like, if he was someone that Cersei knew and that was sort of it at the beginning of the movie, like he was covering for her and then she left or something, and then he shows up at the very end with the sword, you know, like that's still like, it still would have been teaser bait, but like that's what you expect for these kind of scenes. Like, he took up so much space in this movie.
I just think that it's so funny that like the story is essentially resolved, with the notable exception of like an eye socket and like 4 fingers sticking out of the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah. Also, I didn't know that they killed him. I thought they just like froze him, because I wasn't sure about that, because like they don't tell you that till later. You know, it was like, all right, so you put him back to sleep or he's hibernating. No, he's dead.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
that was news to me. So I'm glad you confirmed that for me. I just think it's funny that all of that stuff gets kind of handled and we say our goodbyes. And then like Jon Snow shows back up to be like, I got to tell you, I'm pretty important too. And and then one of I will say the most compelling images that I have ever seen in a Marvel movie. That face appearing in the sky just over the planet Earth like that is just as a really cool image. In a movie full of, I think, generally well shot, cool like photography. She even managed to. All of her movies take place in and around South Dakota. She even managed to get them back to South Dakota. But the
dude, the face appearing in the sky. All I said was like, "Show me what you got."
That's funny.
I was like, "Oh, stop! They did it. That's hilarious."
But I have a question. So,
Sure.
because I kept looking over to the two children I was with, or to the two children that were next to me, who were very excited to see the new Marvel movie, who came to see this film, and I kept looking over at them during sort of like these very long exposition dumps, these sort of like softer, quiet moments where people are like cupping each other's faces in their hands or whatever, to see if they were interested in this, because Marvel movies are incredibly overstimulating. Generally, they have a lot going on. There's a joke, there's an action sequence, there is a sight gag, there's they're movies that are sort of like built from the ground up specifically not to leave you with too much time to think. And I want to ask y'all, is this something where we're reaching the narrative or thematic limits of the type of story you can tell with a Western studio superhero movie?
No, I wouldn't go that far.
And this is just a genuine question because I don't know the answer.
No, because like I think this movie just had too much going on, and it left too many sticks in the fire, and it never really closed a story loop.
But none of these movies really ever do.
Well, like for this one exactly, like you had the Deviants thing we talked about a little while ago, where he gained sentience and then poof, and then you have the story with Kit. You have did Ikaris actually die, or is she just like flying into the sun somewhere? Because I could have sworn they were immortal. I don't know.
he's sort of dead, but also they have plenty of ways to bring him back. Yeah. And we'll talk about the structure of the Eternals shortly.
Like, is he dead, or is he not dead, or is he doing his Superman thing? I don't know.
It's not a sun dip situation. It's not. He doesn't fly in there to absorb energy necessarily.
I mean, he doesn't really need to. But and then I was very upset that what's her face, the main chick, she just let herself die, and I was like, fight back, please. Don't just like hug him. But there's a lot going on here, and they never really finish they don't really finish them properly. I feel like if this had been done properly, this would be a whole different story. But because they're like Case and Jmike, it's kind of messy. It's a messy movie, and it never really like tries to nail down a single point. It's going everywhere. If they had stuck to a main point and gone along with that, it'd been great. But it doesn't. Just doesn't at all.
I think that this movie could have been more successful. Like, I don't think that it's past the point of what we could accomplish in a movie like this. Like, I think part of the problem is that the stated goal of the Celestial, like the stated one versus the real one, both are kind of gibberish. And I don't know if the movie's super clear on it up until we get to the like, oh, it's actually an egg thing. And I think that if they had structured this in a scenario of what the goal of you, the Eternals, were, is to cultivate mankind into ascendancy so that they join you in the sun kind of thing, like the Superman 78 kind of speech. But that actually is part of the characters as they are, and like kind of sometimes the excuse for why the Celestials do anything. Like the egg thing is one of the possible reasons why the Celestials play an interest in Earth in the comics, but that's only one of the excuses for it. Another one is that they are trying to develop beings who are akin to them, and so like characters like Franklin Richards, who is a reality more like warper on a high level, is seen as a potential candidate for ascendancy to a celestial status. So I think that the idea that maybe that they are trying to shepherd humanity into a position, and then they find out that humanity isn't so much a thing that they're shepherding, but they're actually just a crop they're growing. And like you could maybe even play with the imagery of the difference of those two lifestyles in like Babylonian times. Like you could make that case that what they thought they were doing was this noble process of cultivating humanity, and really all that they were doing was prepping them to be harvested. Like that's the juxtaposition right there. And like I don't think they hit that nail hard enough, because like the purpose of why they're there is just like, oh, we're going to pull back on the Deviants. But the Deviants thing is also like its own kind of gibberish and doesn't really make sense. And like the whole bullshit about them being aliens, I think is goddamn fucking stupid and like doesn't work in terms of like driving these characters or explaining anything. It's like such a weird detail there that is just confusing and doesn't match up with anything. I'm not trying to be like, oh, but the comics, but like, they made it more confusing on purpose, and I'm mad about that, because I think the fact that it's confusing is why people don't like this movie.
Yeah, I mean, you're correct about that. I struggle to. I feel like an Eternals movie being confusing was just always going to be. It was just the prophecy. Those comics are, like I said, very difficult to parse, and kind of hard to sort of like give yourself over to, in the way that I think a lot of Jack Kirby comics are. Personally, for me, I would not say that's for everybody. A lot of people really love Jack Kirby's work. I find his space stuff in particular to be nigh impenetrable. But I don't know. It's I don't know how you condense this epic thing that they are trying to do into a Marvel movie. And I don't say Marvel movie as a pejorative. I mean that it's a specific thing that people want specific stuff from. And it's a Herculean task that was sort of like just the ball was dropped on.
Which is a shame, because the inspiration for Hercules is in this movie. Well, and like I think this is what we were saying before. Like the movie didn't have a hook to get people who are invested in the MCU here. Like they had to like stop and be like, why didn't you stop Thanos? Oh, we could only do stuff with the Deviants, which then he's another Eternal. Like at the end of the movie, they finally reveal, and they're like, what? Like, wait, like it's all part of the same shit. Okay. The Celestials should have been the big mystery that we're trying to find out more about, because like that's the bigger thing throughout this whole world of the MCU. Like being like, all right, so what is their deal? We should have found out little bits about that, and then like had some kind of reason why things were happening here well enough. And I think those could have like kind of saved it. But it is this big sprawling superhero movie that feels the need to be set in the present day, even though like aside from Kingo, I can't think of a real reason why they should be set in the present day. Like maybe Phastos with the atom bomb, but like everything, like even with the Celestial coming out of the ground, like this is good myth making stuff right there. If like, you know, like now in the comics, there is a mountain that is like the Dreaming Celestial. And like, they could have like used that as sort of like a similar structure here, where if this was taking place 2,000 years ago, and that's where like, or further, 4,000, you know, whatever you want to, like wherever you want to set it. And like all of a sudden that, like at the end of the movie, like the Celestial that's emerging from the ground starts to be, accrue dirt and grime. And so, and eventually like it's covered to the point where it becomes a mountain of sediment and so forth. And like maybe a famous one in the world, like those would be logical things too. And then you don't have to like worry so much about like, what are the Eternals up to? Well, the last time we saw them was a few thousand years ago.
But Case, it has to be in President Day, because Cersei has to date a supporting character from the new Blade movie.
Right, exactly. It's there's so much shit going on here. You know, like I said, if it wasn't tied into the MCU, there would be no question here. Or you sideline them for different reasons. Like have them all be like in positions of power. Kingo's a great example of that right now. So is Druid. Like, they're both in positions where they probably couldn't just jump out of their chairs to like go fight big cosmic events earlier in the MCU. But all the other ones are like, well, why wasn't Cersei doing anything? Oh, they were forbidden. Well, sell us on how that feels like endemic to who they are. You know, again, like the whole, like, they don't really change, but at the same time, they're all fairly wishy-washy. They don't have strong points of view.
Yeah. Can let's switch gears. Did y'all like anything about the movie?
I generally like the casting.
Yeah.
Like, across the board, that was good. I really like the Gilgamesh-Thena relationship.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really good.
That reminded me of the Hulk Black Widow thing, where he was like, "Hold my hand." You're unemployed. What was the line? Like, you're going far away or something like that.
Sun's going down, something like that.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, the sun's getting real low
Yeah.
is the Hulk one, yeah.
I was like, if they had said that, that would have been awesome.
I was a big fan of the casting as well. I was the Thena and Gilgamesh relationship. It's always great to see Don Lee. I love watching him work, and it's cool to see Angelina Jolie back in action hero mode. I do have an issue with Marvel movies, including this one, where people are fighting, but hits don't feel like they're landing. And for a moment, you get a reprieve from that, where Makkari is taking on Ikaris. I thought that was really cool.
That was a great scene.
That was great.
I thought that was really, really cool. I also love the Makkari and Druid relationship. I think that they had way more chemistry than Richard Madden and Gemma Chan. I wanted them on screen as much as possible, and we didn't get that much of it. I've always been a big fan of Barry Keoghan, who plays Druid, ever since I saw him in Dunkirk. He was fantastic in that. He's rumored to be in the Batman. Karun, I liked Karun. Kingo's valet.
Oh, yeah. He was great. All the Kingo stuff I fucking loved. Everything with Camille Nanjiani on screen, I was there for. Like, oh, don't worry about him. I've known him for 50 years. Like, he thought I was a vampire. He tried to stab me in the chest, and I've apologized, but not enough.
That stuff was really, really fun.
That actually, that is the biggest refutation for my point about, like, why does it have to be modern day? I think the Bollywood stuff was fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Like, that was such a perfect use of a character.
I will say this. And it is because Kumail Nanjiani is a stand-up comedian with a brand new body. There is a level of visual splendor and kinetic timing to Bollywood filmmaking that this film's Bollywood moment just did not capture, and I was so disappointed. But
now, do you think that was Kumail, or do you think that was more like their choreographer, or just like Chloe's aesthetic? They're just not quite being Bollywood.
I think all of it, all of the above. I mean, there was choreography, and the dancers were hitting it, and he wasn't. So everybody was dropping the ball. But I loved Karun, loved Lauren Ridloff and Barry Keoghan. And I do, because you brought up the old guard, I do want to talk about Phastos and his husband and his kid. I adored that sequence. I adored the relationship.
That was really good.
That Phastos has with his family. I cannot remember the actor's name, but the actor who plays his husband is actually a gay Muslim actor who I've seen in several things. So it was really cool to see him and a mate. And the stuff he's been in has been very independent. So it was really cool to see him in a major studio picture. That was really awesome. And then they kiss, and then the movie moves forward, and nobody's the wiser. And the thing is that that's it, right? That's all like we want. Like he is in a loving relationship in the way that other people get to be in heterosexual people get to be in loving relationships in these kinds of movies. And then the story moves forward, and he, as a queer character or whatever, gets to be a part of the action going forward, gets his moments, does all that stuff. That's literally all it takes. And it's so interesting that like, and maybe there was, I just kept hearing more about like sort of the diversity of the overall cast, and mostly about Salma Hayek, because she said she kept crying when she put on her superhero suit, and Lauren Ridloff for being the first deaf character. But after years and years of Disney saying, hey, y'all, the first gay character is in this movie. Oh, no, wait. The first gay character is in this movie. Oh, wait a minute. The first gay character, this movie. But stop right there. The first gay character is in that movie over there. I was really, really just comforted by the fact that this character just got to be here and exist. Mm-hmm. So that was really cool to me. Felt the same way about it that I felt about, the murder husbands in The Old Guard. And
the murder husbands.
And I was super into it. There are also, like I was talking about the production design on it, when they're actually, given a shit, is really cool. I like the design of the Domo, their spaceship. I think that the general like civvy costume design is really well done, especially on Cersei and on Makkari. I think that their costumes are interesting. They look different than the regular sort of Marvel superhero costume, which seems to be like themed motorcycle wear, and they look like they serve some sort of purpose, and they are visually in concert with each other, but they don't all just look the same. Some people have like capes and stuff like that. Some people have those sort of Greek loincloth kind of things going on. The bottom half of the costume, I think they're really well put together. And Chloe Zhao, if the lady can't do nothing, she can shoot a field of grass. She can shoot a beach. She can, she knows how to compose a really eye-catching visual. And I'm glad that was able to carry over, because even with, directors who have been doing it longer than her. Well, I will say I'm happy to say that to see that her visual style was able to be translated here, because Marvel tends to pluck directors who do not have discernible visual styles, because they can just sort of blend into the house style a little bit more. And it was cool to see this as like a change of pace. And those are my positives.
Yeah, sticking with Phastos for a second, I rather liked the sort of look of his like kind of like artificer tech magic stuff that was going on there.
That was pretty cool.
But here's a question for you based on the teaser at the end of Shang-Chi. Where are the rings of his like weird tech stuff, the 10 rings? Because it has the same yellow energy effect as when Shang-Chi has it. And it is leading an audience member when you watch the end of Shang-Chi, where it's like, this thing is older than like X, Y, or Z stuff that's going on here. It's much older, and the energy effects look like all the stuff we see in the trailers for the Eternals at that point, making you think, the rings must be some sort of artifact from the Eternals. And they look, the way the rings move and the way they look in design are just like all the rings that Phastos uses in his tech stuff. And I kept thinking like, oh, did he lose some of his rings at one point? And that became the 10 rings.
Could be. I was thinking much, much older, because the Eternals are like, I've only been here for like 7,000 years.
Right. Yeah. That's only the existence of human civilization. Not even human humanity, like just human civilization, sort of.
But you wake up and you're Kevin Feige and you've got all the pieces on a board, on like a little whiteboard. Where do you send these characters next? Because I have a hard time believing that there's going to be an Eternal sequel. I just think that they wanted these people on the board.
Yeah, or are they out there in the world now? But like that, now that they have sort of taken a step back from like their original intent of being like, we're just doing what the Celestial tells us. Like, does that mean they're going to be everywhere now?
I think that's interesting. I can't imagine that like I said earlier, I can't imagine they're going to be too far away from whatever is happening in the next Thor movie.
Well, and the way that the Eternals were tied into Marvel stuff before was through the Thor comics.
There you go.
Since you got to explain how these god beings are also dealing with these other god beings.
They bring up Thor like 5 or 6 times in this movie anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they might show up again at the end of Love and Thunder.
Mm-hmm.
You never know.
Or just throughout. I mean, the ship left and like most of them left Earth right at the end. I'm
like 3. Like 3.
Yeah, I think it was Druid, Makkari, Thena.
Thena, that was it.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and then on Earth, Sprite, who's now human.
I have a question about that.
By all means.
Okay.
Why didn't she just age her up?
Well, now she can age, though.
No, she was like, I was like, the whole thing, she was like, well, I can't experience stuff like everyone else can because I'm a kid. I was like, so why not just age her up?
To give her like a longer life than she would have. I mean, I think that if that was the case, I don't think that like I would want, what was she like stuck being 13? I don't think that I would want like 8 years of my life.
Like in the beginning, she was like pretending to be like some co-ed or whatever when you first meet her, and she runs off and she's like 12. And I was like, oh, okay. But like, I was like, why not just age her up to like,
I mean, she also 20s? Betrayed them. So like what they are also doing here is a death sentence. Like
it's dooming her to high school.
Powers. Like, yes, but I mean, it is also from the perspective of people who at this point are 6,000 years old, just as far as they remember, let alone the reincarnation subplot.
They gave her a choice though. So it wasn't like a death sentence. She chose to like be human. So I was like, why did I just age her up?
But they'd have to deal with her like her powers was a factor. Like she betrayed them. Like they'd have to deal with her in some regard. The choice to make her humans is a fairly humane, but like at the same time does remove her from the board, as we keep saying.
Did she lose her powers, or she just be able to age now?
I think she's human.
Yeah,
so
I think she just
her powers are gone in that sense.
I thought they just aged her up, having it easier.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there are ways for these folks to wrap around in the Ant-Man space, but like you said, I think and them being a part of the Thor comics, it makes a lot of sense. So yeah, that's probably when I think they're gonna show up next. I just want someone to explain.
Cersei just seems like a big player now. Like this is kind of her coming out story. And Cersei's always been the one that, like I said, she was an Avenger. Like the other ones don't join the Avengers. Like she's out there in the world, like participating and so forth, flirting with Captain America, like and doing all that kind of stuff. So like she seems to be positioned now to be in that space, but like she's very powerful. Like even as stripped down in powers that she has in this movie versus her comic version, she's still incredibly powerful. She killed a god that was coming out of the planet. So it's kind of in the same ballpark of like a Wanda. Like what are you going to be doing now, huh?
I guess we'll see when Arishem is done judging. I gotta say it was really funny because you were talking about Reed Richards' son Franklin. Who I don't know much about, but I know that he's pretty powerful. And you were like, oh, he could possibly be a Celestial someday. And that is just a very funny concept to me by the name alone. It's just like the Celestials, Arishem, Ego, Tiamat, Franklin. That's very funny.
Franklin and what's his face? What's the dude's name? They become like best friends. Galactus? Is it Galactus?
Well,
yeah,
depending on which book you're looking at, he's had some interactions with Galen of Ta, and in the Earth X timeline, he actually becomes Galactus.
He and Galactus are all buddy after a while in one of those timelines. And I was like, that's fun.
Interesting. I thought it was going to be like something where, like, in comics where like characters become kids. Like they make.
Well, Galactus became a human for a while.
Oh, Freaky Friday?
Was he like a child?
No, he was just like a human. Like adult, like he became his cosmonaut or whatever the term was, science naut, I think, like because he's from the universe that exists before our universe, which was like all science driven in a way that our universe has a mix of magic and science.
Like I said, I'm a DC Comics person, but
that's a branch of Marvel I do love.
Marvel's got a lot going on, and it is very confusing to me.
I mean,
DC started talking about stuff like the anti-life equation. I said, tap out.
Well, and that is why, like, we haven't done a fourth world movie. Like, we've had movies where fourth world elements have been in there, but no one's going to do like the story of like Mr. Miracle escaping apocalypse so that he can like rejoin his family on New Genesis.
We don't need none of that right now.
That's going to take some time before we're there.
We just need to nail down a coherent story right now.
Yeah. This is the last thing I'll say about it. I am of the unpopular opinion that I don't necessarily think that DC needs a universe. Just start making movies, man. Just like do whatever. I
don't know if that's unpopular, since that's clearly what they're doing at this point.
It seems unpopular on Twitter because that's what they're doing, and everyone seems to hate it.
Every opinion's unpopular on Twitter, man.
Yeah, Twitter's not a real place.
But yeah, no, I am interested in seeing how this stuff plays into the rest of the universe going forward. But yeah, that's really it. Maybe I'll do. This is a rewatch. I did it on Disney Plus before I watched this, and I was drunk, and that was great. So if you like, it genuinely was. And I'm not saying it made the movie better. It just made my viewing experience better. I probably watch it again when there's like a Storm Akima commentary for it. But other than that, that isn't even, I don't even know how much of an endorsement that is or isn't for the movie, because I don't rewatch Marvel movies to begin with. So I don't know.
Yeah. Can I lore dump for a second here?
The movie did. So why can't you?
So I mentioned that like Cersei's power are like way stripped down from where they are in the comics, and that the Eternals actually all have the same powers. Like one reason why it made sense to talk about this movie is because like Ikaris looks very much like Superman throughout this whole movie. Like he's a flying, super strong guy with heat vision. None of the powers that he demonstrates in this movie are unique to him. They are all in the way it is in the comics. They all have all of those powers. They all have the heat vision blasts, or atomic vision or whatever. They're all super strong. They're all psychic. They're all telekinetic. They can all change matter. They can all do illusions. They're all super fast. They all just have different degrees of it. And like I said, they focus on the ones that they want to be good at. And so you end up with characters like Ikaris, who is the second strongest of the 616 Eternals. He's the best flyer amongst them, hence the name Ikaris. And he's described as being an arrow. He's a living weapon of the Celestials. Like that's kind of like his shtick there. Like he's tough enough to get into a fight with Black Bolt, but Black Bolt is impressive enough to actually win. But in that kind of upper ballpark of like characters. Mm-hmm. Gilgamesh is crazy strong. Gilgamesh in this movie is called Gilgamesh exclusively, but he is the inspiration for Gilgamesh, the hero of Uruk. But he is also the inspiration for half of the Legends of Hercules, and that is actually a pain point for the two of them, that they split up the labors and that they each argue about who should get the credit for which specific feat from myth, which I think is like kind of a fun detail for those two characters.
Interesting.
But then we have other reality versions of Eternals, such as Hyperion, who is a literal stand-in for Superman.
Hyperion is an Eternal.
Yes, some versions of Hyperion is, but that's where it,
I love the case. I love that you were like, now don't think you understand now. just
the main Hyperion that like the one that was like the Squadron Supreme in the 70s, 80s, etc. That Hyperion is an Eternal, and in fact, when his eyes burn out in the series Squadron Supreme, when they get stuck in 616, he becomes friends with Makkari, and Makkari teaches him how to reconfigure matter, and that's how he rebuilds his eyes with his superpowers, and because that's like the thing they do. But his energy blasts are the same as all that. Like all of his powers are just like he's like not trained, but very gifted with their powers. And like, there's the big Fantastic Four villain, the Overmind, who can take over a planet with his mental powers. He's an Eternal. Like, there's a lot of really powerful Eternals. Thanos is an Eternal, as we mentioned, but he's actually one of the weaker Eternals because he's from he is a descendant from an offshoot that like, it's a little more weirdly mixed, and he has like some deviant traits and whatnot going in. But then there's the whole thing about how they were created, where it's the Celestials come to a planet and they find an appropriate race, and they implant the celestial seed in the populace, and that creates the potential for superpowers in them. But it also creates a shifting predatory strain called the Deviants, and so they also create like the most excellent like superpowered ones, which are the Eternals. And every world they go to, it has this cycle, which is why there are worlds that they never go to, that the people there just aren't supposed to get superpowers, like the Kree. But then there are different configurations for this all. So like the Skrull are actually the deviant strain of their race, having become dominant on the planet, having wiped out the main family group, and then also killed all but one of the Eternals of the Skrull planet. And that became their god of their core. And that's just like a really fun like offshoot there. But so like there's this bigger lore going on that I think actually the movie ignores to its detriment. Like the idea that like the Eternals are literally supposed to be the most advanced humans possible, like who have all the superpowers, that have all the craziness and so forth. They stripped that down so that they are just kind of the X-Men. Like they each have their shtick, and that's it. And that's kind of a bummer because like that, like it's so like they're supposed to be this like weird beacon of what is possible that can't die because they're invulnerable. And if you somehow figured out how to kill them, because like nothing's that invulnerable, they just come back to life. And like it's just like kind of a bummer that we don't get all the crazy shit that is in this movie. They could have gone even crazier. like do more with that. Like Ikaris is supposed to be like, oh yeah, he's just really good at all this shit. Like everyone's practiced their own thing. Cersei's practiced changing shit to other stuff. Sprite has practiced illusion craft. Rogue's practiced controlling people's minds. Like explore that whole concept of the Superman, because otherwise it just looks like, oh yeah, we gave each of you a special power and didn't even really have a plan for how they were supposed to work together, because that would also be kind of cool. Again, this movie like has big thoughts about systems but isn't doing anything with them. Like how cool would this movie be is that like Eternals constantly die, but every time they die they come back, but part of their memory is wiped, and also like they're supposed to work in tandem to like do stuff with humanity, and the fact that they split up is why humanity kind of goes crazy and like allows like capitalism to take over.
It was them.
Which kind of lines up with the timeline.
Yeah, that's actually
yeah. Like that's like like the colonial period is the shift from mercantilism to capitalism as the dominant driving economic force in the nation or in the world, spreading like a virus. So like you could have said stuff about that. Like you could have done things about that. Like you could have had one person be the big driver for it. Like Phastos would be a logical choice for it, and it becomes a machine that he is no longer able to control. Like that's where I get kind of bummed out about this movie, because it's like, oh look, we've got a cool shot of Richard Madden flying with energy blasts, and then it's like, oh, but he's the only one who gets all the powers. Everyone else has like one specific power that they do a thing with. Athena has like construct weapons, and Gilgamesh also has construct weapons, but they're just like gloves.
Yeah, they're like those like the sock 'em boppers.
Yeah, I thought it was a cool look, but I kind of wish they all just had those so that it didn't feel like it was like his one power is he makes Hulk hands.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he does like the power stomps, so the shockwave stomps too. Like
right.
I was like that's kind of cool, I guess. But yeah,
I just wish everyone had similar effects when they were doing stuff. Like I kind of like the idea that they all have an armor that we just can't see at any point. And like if every time anyone was hit with anything, it like flashed or something like that. In terms of presenting powered individuals in a cinematic setting, there should be a point. Like the fact that someone has a superpower either should be a metaphor for their character. It should be a quandary that they have to deal with. Like what with this power of action am I utilizing? Like what am I doing for the world with it? Or what challenge am I facing as a result of it? Like, am I tempted by the virtue of my power for a thing? Like, what conversations are we really having for most of these characters? Like, I think for the most part, it's kind of interchangeable, but Ikaris has like the least helpful power in terms of actually doing the creating of a society kind of thing, but he's really good at just killing a thing. And like, if like the question should be like, oh, I'm here literally just to like cull the herd. Like I'm here to wipe out, to kill a thing. And that's it. But if their only purpose is fighting deviants, they should all just have those exact same powers. And if their purpose is cultivating humanity, then like Ikaris's role should either be like very necessary, like a necessary evil, or it
Conjugal
should be
visit.
What are we trying to say with each of these characters? What are we doing with it? Like what?
And how do they work in tandem with one another? Because
there's no team battle that feels like appropriate aside from like once like Makkari is coming into play with like Phastos, and like they're the last two we get in the team.
And then even just to their point of trying to like push humanity and society forward and all that kind of stuff. Like everyone seemed to have like, well, not everyone. Like Phastos helped them build tools and weapons. I guess Cersei irrigated a field. But I didn't really understand like how those powers were working in tandem with each other to create the society that they were trying to convince us sort of all came from these 10 beings being here. I don't understand how it helped how exactly it helped humans along, and I don't understand what function the powers served in relation to one another.
Yeah, because like they each had clearly the ability to assume a role. Like Druid, for example, being able to control things, you can be like, all right, well, through my control, I can drive humanity to labor in such a way that is collectively beneficial, as opposed to their separate interests, like kind of like separating them. You know, Phastos clearly having this like tech proficiency is like its own thing. I mean, then we got our 3 fighters in the group with Ikaris, Gilgamesh, and Thena. You're like, okay, what are we doing here? Oh, just fighting stuff, or maybe having that as like a specific role, having like a caste system between them, like the builders and the fighters in that group, like working with them because they all could be part of a team. Like Makkari could be a messenger or also a tech person, but like I said, like more focused on the speed part of things. I don't know. It's just like there needs to be some direction that they all kind of thought they were heading in for them to go awry if they're going to like deviate from each other, or, you know, like split up and go off into the world and feel like that they've lost their purpose. Like, what was their purpose to begin with, really?
I feel like movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe are always sort of missing some point, or have something that I'm just like, oh, we could have done a little bit more with that. We could have put a little bit more effort into this. We could have, and this movie is, like I said, very ambitious, but even the movies that don't have as much going on always leave me kind of wanting something. And I blame that solely on the fact that these movies have like 2-year turnaround times. Like they, like, yeah, from from wholesale conception to release, they are just sort of like put together so fast. And I mean, I tweeted a few months ago, just like big movies were really good when they all took like 4 years to make, because there was just so much more time to conceptualize these things. Just like, and nowadays, I mean, has Hollywood heard of a second draft? I mean, they're just saying, yeah, looks right. There's some words, and just sending it off to production. It feels like sometimes, especially when you have such a house of cards, such a sort of like multimedia apparatus like the Marvel Cinematic Universe that is now that went from making like one movie every 2 years to making like, now we're at what, 4 movies and a number of television series every year. Like, just as an outfit, it feels at worst untenable, at best detrimental to holistic storytelling. And you're always left with these questions of like, why was that like that? Why did they make that decision? Couldn't we have fleshed this out a little bit more? We could, but we didn't have time. And especially with this movie that is trying to be 3 movies in 2 hours.
It should have been maybe 2 hours. It could have cut off a whole extra hour of exposition, and it might have helped this movie in the long run.
Because the movie really does just stop for like 25 minutes to be like, in the beginning.
We thought the text crawl would make it easier. And then they have Dane Whitman just like being like, hey, hold on, we have to stop for a second. I need to ask you all the questions. Why are all these things like, like the way they are?
And then disappear for the rest of the movie before you come back to be like, well, I'm something of a hero myself.
There's something special about me too. Yeah. Ah, man.
Only for him to effectively just be like Martin Freeman in the Black Panther, which is really funny to me. Because like Martin
Freeman, at least in the Black Panther, has like actual real stuff in that.
He's not Martin Freeman in the Black Panther movie. He had like shit to do in Black Panther. He was Martin Freeman in Captain America: Civil War.
There we go. Yes.
Where he's just there to be like, hey
guys,
I'll be back.
Yeah, I think the problem with this property in general is that it feels like it should be the central MacGuffin for a lot of stuff. Like, Phastos should have been like kind of tied into the creation of Wakanda as a state. Like, Makkari should probably had some role somewhere. I'm not sure. Sprite should have like inspired people's stories somewhere. Like the fact that they're set in Babylon and then like there's like kind of a deviation point feels like that they should have been behind this. And the fact that like one of them is Gilgamesh should feel like it's like, oh, this is the Tower of Babel moment. And there's like a big splintering of human civilization. And it goes off and it spreads. And like that they should have then played parts throughout all these different little spots.
That's what I thought they were going to do. And that's why I thought they were time jumping around history for like certain like significant points to say like, hey, they were behind this, or hey, they're behind this, or this is why that happened. And no, they're just kind of like, meh, we're just around. We're not really doing anything. But I like because like especially at the way they all split and they had the big argument about everything. Where what was his name? The telepath guy. What's his name?
Druig.
Yeah, he was like the whole big confrontation with him and Ikaris. I thought they had somehow them arguing had started the whole conquistadors coming and killing everything. And I was like, oh, they're just kind of in the background again.
Yeah, they're just in a room watching a massacre occurring. But they're in relative peace there. Now I get like Druig's probably protecting them in some regard, or someone is doing it. Sprite's casting an illusion or whatever. But like, yeah, they're just like kind of passively observing it. Yeah, like it feels like they should have been the catalyst for so many things behind the scenes, and maybe like it, the MCU is probably too established to have them in like the what is it, the Jack Black episode of Community kind of role, where it's like, no, I've literally been in every scene, like just off camera every time, kind of thing going on. But like they could have had them like leave the world and then like come back at the start of this movie, having like left like right before Captain America, the first Avenger, or something like that, or left as in the wake of the atom bomb. Like that could have also been a spot where like, no, humanity's done, and like they all collectively left. But the fact that it's a gang getting back together thing still keeps this like vibe of like there's so much that was happening. And y'all were literally doing nothing. Like, it's not like you had other things that you were doing and like were occupied, like in a Captain Marvel kind of scenario. Like, it's like literally you're just there and like you have so much power and the shit's so bad and you didn't participate in any of it. And like, why?
Well, it's not like they had to like pull a Wonder Woman and get involved in major conflicts. They could have like helped with like, you could have said they were behind what's his name? I forgot their names. Technopath.
Phastos.
He could have behind the scientific research for like some kind of miracle drug or figure out how to cure a disease or something. He could have been behind that. Or Cersei could have been behind some kind of agricultural phenomenon. They could have been like chipping in throughout history, doing certain things, and still not have to get involved with like war.
Yeah,
you said they were just. Like the dad like pulls out his newspaper and sees his kids fighting. It's like, whatever.
Yeah, deforestation on Cersei's watch is kind of whack.
Yeah, like they were just there, around.
That's some ops shit.
Not wanting to be bothered. They weren't actively trying to like help or make anything better. They were just around.
My thesis it goes back to Chloe Zhao not really understanding the assignment. And it goes back to not just her, but sort of like everyone involved not really understanding the assignment. I think we're in this weird moment where since like 30 years ago, we sort of all decided that like that this was like going to be the most interesting thing that anybody does. And there's like these two camps. These camps that see like superheroes and genre stuff as kind of like kid stuff or whatever. And there's one camp, and then there's another camp that sees it as like sort of like the most important thing. And then you have like this sort of like coming together of like two different sides of it. Chloe Zhao on the sort of like art house cinema side, and Kevin Feige on the sort of corporate cinema side, coming together thinking that it was going to be the easiest thing in the world to not only mesh their styles of filmmaking and what they want out of the types of movies that they watch, but also to do so on a very, very hard to sell concept. And I think that it was not only heavily ambitious on Chloe Zhao's part, because I think there's some part of the mind of a filmmaker like Chloe Zhao, or and by extension, folks who like sort of maybe look down on superhero films or whatever that think that they're very easy to do. And it's a very easy sort of storytelling cross to bear. And I think that there's some part of the sort of more corporate wing of filmmaking and people who really enjoy that stuff who think that there is a sort of algorithmic mathematical formula to creating compelling art house cinema. And Kevin Feige was just like, oh yeah, I can get that crowd. That's going to be easy. And Chloe Zhao came in and said, I can do this thing. It's probably easy compared to the type of more sort of complex interior storytelling that I try to do on my own. And it all sort of crashed into this trifle, like the British dish trifle, this like trifle of interesting ideas and compelling visuals that do not make up a great sum of pretty decent parts. So I think that we're sort of like, it's an interesting artifact in the sort of like culture war that's going on between sort of like blockbuster genre films and the rest of movies. And I'm glad we have it just as an artifact to that.
Yeah. Well, and again, like I love the Eternals as a property. Like I think that's so cool. I love so many of the visuals of this. I think we got a great representation from Gilgamesh, who is often called the Forgotten One, and I liked how his like dying words were "Remember me," which was kind of just a fun beat there. I love that we got all these characters here, but it is such like a labyrinthian structure to explain Marvel cosmology, and this movie did not do anything to sort of assist us in that spectrum, especially by lying and then pulling out the rug from under us.
Yeah.
Again, you're right. It's not better than the sum. It's not even really equal to the sum of its parts, but like there's a lot of nice parts.
That's fair. That's a fair assessment.
And sometimes, that's all you can ask for. Doing my show below freezing made me so much nicer to movies. I'm a big proponent of like every movie is a miracle, making them is hard. I don't like try and take them apart, but like I also understand and can respect the power of ideas and the power of artistic ambition, and there's a lot of it going on here. And one hopes that when the time comes to take another chance like this, because when big studio stuff that's this weird flops, it's always scary because you're like, is anybody going to try and take this chance again? And I hope that they do. For the sake of, female directors who want to be in the blockbuster space, for the sake of, just getting more varied and global faces on screen in these big action spectaculars. I hope that all of that ends up inspiring people to do more of it than less of it, because folks like us, we remember a time where there was not this platonic ideal of like nerdy mainstream stuff, and stuff just had to be bad for a very long time before it got good. And I think that we're spoiled with stuff that is like consistently a 7.5. It's the thing with like the Marvel movies versus the DC movies. Marvel movies are going to range from like a 6 to like a light 8, and they can be really fun and really great. But you have DC movies, and they will either be a 2 or
you're being generous.
They will either be a 2 or an 11, and there is no in between usually. So I hope that we just keep throwing spaghetti like this at the wall, because I take 1,000 more Eternals over Spider-Man No Way Home.
Well, I have a question now. Would this have been better served as a Disney Plus original?
Oh, yeah. Having space to breathe. Yeah, at 100%. Yeah.
Because I feel like we're getting to the point where they're trying to be so bombastic and like, here's the next part of the phase of our movies and everything. but they also have like Disney Plus, which does huge service to like more intimate stories.
Mm-hmm.
And like this might have been better served for like a short run miniseries, like they did like all last summer.
I'm a fan of most of the Disney Plus series. I like them quite a bit, and I think that would have been a great idea.
Yeah, and
it wouldn't have happened with this cast, but it would have been a great idea.
No, totally would not have happened with this cast. I like this movie tried to cram a lot in to get like all these cool set pieces and a lot of these ideas, and they could have breathed if it was a show. And like I've seen a lot of people making that basic point, and I think that holds true. Like a little bit more space would have been great. Like it's just such a big thing.
But also just this thing. Everything doesn't need to be a TV show. But this thing in particular, like people would just be like, "Oh man, I wish that this was a TV show. This is a TV show." And I'm not saying this is you. I just hear this a lot. I agree that this would have been better as a TV show, but I do not think that is a rule across the board. Movies are important.
Yeah. Well, because like compare this with like Endgame, for example. Endgame's a long movie, but it shouldn't have been a TV show. It was the right length or the right amount of stuff for the amount of bouncing around and like celebration of the MCU that it did, with a big like third act for the sake of all the fans. Like longer would not have benefited that in any way, or more broken up would not have benefited that in any way. Like when we watched the Snyder Cut for the Justice League, one of the weird points about it was it's like, oh, well, it couldn't be a TV show. It still had to be a movie in terms of its structure. Like any longer would have felt like both like kind of broken, and also the peaks and valleys wouldn't have really fit a TV show structure. But like this movie easily could have had some of those points. Like big flashbacks could have been like if you needed a big climax to your individual episode, you could have that be a flashback or a modern day thing. So you have like some flexibility there. You know, you can play with the pacing in that in a way that this movie kind of felt like some abrupt shifts when it occurred. Like when like Kingo is introduced, all of a sudden it becomes much more lighthearted, much more of a comedy. Like there's a big shift there. And that if that was an episode, or at least like the episode introducing him, like that would have felt appropriate. But as it is here, it feels like a little weird. Like this is a movie I think should have been a show, but like there's plenty of movies that were supposed to be movies, and possibly some of the shows that probably should have just been a movie. Oh, looking at you, Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
And not just with Marvel stuff, I think just generally across the board, like half of the limited series and stuff that we see nowadays 10 years ago would have been movies and would have been fine. I tell people all the time, I would watch Euphoria if it was a one movie. But by the way, just all this clips and stuff, I watch Euphoria via clips on Twitter, and I'm just like, what is going on? What is going on in the show? There's one that came out where all these people were standing in the bathroom talking to each other. There was this one point where like people like expressed concern, and I was just like, are all the people on Euphoria friends? Like, and my friends were like, just watch the show, and I was like, I won't. But the no. But yeah, I agree that it would have been better as a Disney Plus series. But I also agree that Falcon and Winter Soldier would have made a better movie. And so would have Loki.
Really?
But to be completely honest with you, I just didn't like Loki. So.
Gas, don't let the internet hear you.
Oh, no one's watching this.
They can hear me all they want to. I did not like that show. But I loved Hawkeye. Hawkeye was great.
And Hawkeye was like good pacing on that one. Like,
yeah, and it felt like a TV show. It was like instead of just a 6-hour movie. I have a problem with shows. They're just like, oh, we're a 13-hour movie. I wouldn't watch a 13-hour movie.
Yeah,
I haven't seen Sat and Tango. I'm not gonna.
Yeah. So long story short, this movie had a lot of ambition. Like can't really badmouth that. Lot of good visuals, a lot of good moments throughout it, but it doesn't really add up to a thing that changes anything. It doesn't really like revolutionize any perspective on stuff, except for maybe the way that they depicted Makkari for the fight scene there. Like that's going to be a pretty high bar in terms of a super speed fight going forward. But aside from that, like I didn't feel like this really raised that many any expectations for future projects. Like it was overall I'd say like based on your statement of like the Marvel range, I'd give it like a 6.5, maybe
that's fair.
Maybe a low 7. I don't know.
But do more shit like this. Eventually,
yeah,
one of them's gonna be good.
Yeah. Yeah, with like a little bit more. I mean, we know they can do this level of weird and be good. Like the Guardians of the Galaxy movies are there. Thor Ragnarok is there. Like where we're starting to get into that weird level there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I feel like they could still, but also it helps to know what you're trying to, like, if you're doing a big world building movie, like you kind of need to know what the world you're building is. And I don't feel like this movie had like a solid through line of like, all right, so what is the Marvel cosmology, which isn't necessary in every project, but it is necessary in this particular one. And that was kind of a bummer for me. But like, I liked it, but it's also one where I'm definitely like, if you like Marvel movies or if you like all this stuff, like, yeah, it doesn't hurt to check it out, but it's not the first one I'm going to recommend to anyone.
That is fair. That is very fair. It's a very fair assessment.
Yeah. So that's where we're at. CeeJay, you referenced that you have a much softer spot for movies by virtue of a podcast that you host. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and then talk about other stuff you've got going on?
Sure. I am one half of the co-hosts of Below Freezing with CeeJay and Micah. We've been on hiatus for a little while, and we're still on hiatus, but we will be coming back for a 8-episode final mini season. And we're gonna just be sort of saying goodbye and putting the show to rest. We've had a lot of fun doing it, but we wanted to move on and do other things. But more information will be on like my Twitter and on the Below Freezing Twitter and stuff when that happens. In the meantime, I'm writing again. I have a newsletter called Monoplex. You can find it at monoplex.substack.com. The last post was my top 10 favorite films of last year. And Warner Brothers has quite the presence on it. My number 10 being Malignant, and my number 1 being Dune. And lots of various and sundry like musicals and dramas mixed in. But the next post will be about Luck and Moonstruck, the Cher film Moonstruck, which should be out by the end of next week. I'm not entirely sure where this comes out. But yeah, I'm doing a lot of research on it and writing it right now. And I just really love talking about movies, all kinds of movies. And I appreciate you guys for letting me come on and talk about this one because it's one that I found very interesting.
Well, absolutely. Like when you suggested it, I was like, yeah, we totally wanted to do it, and it just sort of didn't fit with. We were doing a bunch of Legion of Superhero stuff also when when the movie came out, and it felt weird to like take a break in the middle of it all because we were like doing Legion of Superhero stuff. Not that this is that alien of a series to that. Like you could certainly fit those. It's all big space stuff, but yeah, it just wasn't. It worked out that the Disney Plus one came out a bit later, and that we can kind of watch it at our leisure and so forth. But yeah, I'm glad that we were able to chat with you about that. There's this part of me because this movie is where it is that I keep wanting it to be this show to be another pass right now, so I can be talking about how I would fix this movie because I have so many thoughts and like maybe they're not like ironed out completely right now because I didn't go into that level of depth, but like I want it to be. So CeeJay, thank you again for coming on. Jmike, if people want to find you, where can they find you?
They can find me on Twitter at jmike101. I post funny jokes and sometimes memes, and I try to reply as much as I can to Case and all his crazy stories.
It does get a little bit weird on MySpace. Speaking of that, you can find the things that I do on Twitter at Case Aiken. You can find the show at Men of Steel Pod because, again, I'm a dum-dum, and someone finally pointed out that you can change the username, not just the display name, on a Twitter account. I didn't realize. I'm stupid. You know what? No, I'm just gonna claim it. I'm old. I'm 37. I'm an old man. I don't understand the internet. But those glimmers of times where I do kind of pretend to understand the internet creates things like our website, certainpov.com, where you can find more episodes of this show and tons of other great podcasts. You can also find a link to our Discord server. We are not doing this call on Discord right now, but we often do, and for public calls and so forth. So you can come join us for either chats or for meme sharing or whatever. Come interact with us. We're very nice. We don't bite. You can find out sneak peeks about upcoming episodes. Tons of great stuff there. You can also come interact with the hosts of tons of the other shows at the network. You can find people like, I'm going to give a shout out to Books That Burn right now. They're a really cool book club podcast where they talk about, well, trauma for the characters in the books and how the author deals with them. But they're one of the new shows on the network. They do a great job. They've had some really cool interviews recently. I'm a really big fan. It's very cool. Robin and Nicole are awesome additions. So go check out Books That Burn. It's great. And check out all the other great shows at certainpov.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks talking about a more straightforward Superman thing. And by that, I mean Superman for all seasons. So come join us for that.
Oh, I love Superman for all seasons.
It's so good.
I have a signed copy of it.
Really?
Oh, wait, signed by who?
Yeah. Tim Sale.
Tim Sale? Nice. Wow. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. We, behind the curtains, we've already recorded that episode. And that is with JD and Angela from the Fables and Reflections podcast. So come check that one out. That was a really good conversation. I can't wait for that to come out in 2 weeks. But until then, stay super, man.
Men of Steel is a certain POV production. Our hosts are Jmike Folsom and Case Aiken. The show is edited by Matt Storm. Our logo is by Chris Batista. Episode art is by Case Aiken. And our theme is by Jeff Moon.
Are you tired of watching your beloved characters being tortured by careless authors?
Are you sick of feeling like they could have swapped out all of the painful action and the plot would remain untouched? Subscribe to Books That Burn, the fortnightly book review podcast focusing on fictional depictions of trauma.
We assume that the characters' reactions are reasonable and focus on how badly or well they were served by their authors.
Join us for our minor character spotlights, main character discussions, and favorite non-traumatic things in the dark books we love.
Find us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.